Hi there, welcome to another episode of Enabling Tomorrow. My name is Tim Metz and I'm your host for today. And today we speak with Colin McElwee. He's the co-founder of Worldreader, a global non-profit organization that provides a huge library of books for free to people in many emerging markets. We talk with Colin about what Worldreader does, but also how he got the idea to found it together with his co-founder after seeing an Amazon Kindle. We also learn how his knowledge and experience from working in the beer industry helps him in running Worldreader. And we talk about how it is to work in the non-profit sector versus his previous experience working at for-profit companies. We also look at how they utilize the data that they get from the user insights and the surprising findings they have about what people are actually reading. And we also talk about Catalyst 2030, which is a group of social change innovators that Colin helped co-found, and they're working toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So with that, let's get started. But before we do that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to be notified when a new video comes out. So let's get started and talk with Colin. But on the background, I see Africa. So how did you get interested in Africa? Is it just because of Worldreader, or did that happen earlier?
Gosh, yeah, well, that was something that came up. Somebody asked me about 3 or 4 years ago. He's actually a guru in communication, a guy called Marshall Gantz. He said, "You guys, like Worldreader and others, you're great at telling people what you do and why it's important what you do, and we can come to that.
Yeah.
But you're never very good at saying why you you do it." And it took me, he said, you won't be able to discover the answer to that until you really, really go deep. And it could come to you in 3 days or 3 months or whatever. And it kind of did. It took me about 3 or 4 months. And the reason, as you can hear by my accents, I'm British. I was born in the Midlands in Nottingham to two Irish parents. My father was from Derry in Northern Ireland and my mother from Dublin. And my father was he kind of suffered in the conflicts in Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason he had to emigrate to look for work, and but he never ever talked about the struggles and the injustices that he'd gone through. He was very keen on the injustices in Vietnam or in El Salvador, or especially in Africa, and it gave me a really, really at an early age, and I didn't know this. Sensitivity to other parts of the world. Yeah. And I'd never, before beginning Worldreader, I'd never physically worked in Africa, but I had quite a lot of knowledge about what was working and what was not. Of course, I've learned a ton in the last 10 years, but if that somewhere explains my sensitivity to the region, we also work in many other regions as well, but Africa was where we started. And it's a labor of love working there.
But so then, what made you, if you'd never been there before, but what was the trigger to start Worldreader? Because before that, you were in marketing, you were managing, you're an executive or in management, right? So how did that translate into getting the idea for and starting Worldreader?
Yeah, it's kind of got a little bit of sort of, in hindsight, a bit of complementarity. I was an executive I did international marketing in the beer business, but for global brands across the world. Yeah. So I learned a lot about marketing, learned a lot about brands and distribution, which we'll come to that in a second. Mm-hmm. I then worked back at my business school as their marketing director for a few years. And I got to know, if you like, the elite end of education, which actually frustrated me a lot because I was continually trying to bring scholarships in and actually bring people in from parts of the world like sub-Saharan Africa. Mm-hmm. Very difficult at that time to get these elite organizations to move that way. Yeah. And then I met a guy when I was in Barcelona, an American guy called David Risher, who's now my co-founder. He was an ex-Amazon top executive at Amazon, previously top executive at Microsoft. And we knew each other for 4 or 5 years here in Barcelona. And we were good friends to our daughters. And then one day, he showed me the Kindle. Yeah. And that was like this is pre iPad days. A lot of people kind of forget that there was no really tablet format really out there. And the Kindle was one of the first ones there. And it held 3,000 books. It was about $300 at the time. And then I can only say, Tim, it was just through my distribution knowledge from the beer business, it kind of came to myself and David that say, gosh, this is a way to transport what's something that's really, really heavy,
Yeah.
books of low value,
Yeah.
but because they're bytes and not atoms, this is a way to get this to parts of the world where distribution is really poor of books.
Yeah.
Namely, Africa was the first place we started, and that's when we started putting two and two together, and really going, well, this device is $350 at that time. We've moved on through devices since then, but what's going to happen to the price of technology, over the coming years? And we just took a bet on it really, really coming down like that. In fact, it came down like that. You can pick up a Kindle, not for $350, for $50, $60 right now. And, within a year of having that sort of light bulb moment, David and I were in a school in Ghana, having given up our day jobs here and gone full time. And we were just really, as you do in business, it's not like saying, hey, we're bringing a solution. We were just observing what happens to kids, to teachers, to communities when you bring in thousands of books, both local and international, through electronic devices. And that was the kind of that's a long way of answering the question of how we kind of pieced, Africa together with jobs and knowledge. And it's really my and David's business knowledge that has really been the driver of what we do.
But then, and so, why did you decide to make it a non-profit? Right, it's a non-profit, right? Worldreader.
It is. Yeah,
you
yeah.
could have also somehow maybe made a business out of it, right? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, even going back 10 years, social enterprise was something that was still emerging and wasn't really, really well understood. So for us, it was kind of this has to be a non-profit. We'll start there. And what we found over the 10 years of being in operations, by the way, we still feel like we're a startup, although we're a pretty established organization in the kind of digital reading sector. We've been tempted a little bit, say, okay, shall we kind of have a little commercial arm here? Because we're very good with corporates. We work with corporates across the world. We have part of our income is income, it's income generated for things that we sell. But here's the thing: we get to the table of decision makers because we're a non-profit. We're seen not to be looking to make revenue out of the players, so that we can have, if you like, government on one hand, we can have the private sector over here, have the community over here. And there's a lot of trust that's put in non-profits. Not always, I would say, there is exceptions out there, right? It's kind of it's not a homogeneous sector, but it's helped us to get to those important decision-making tables, that we can not be like that non-profit. We can be the catalyst or the facilitator to get this into the community where we're not looking for a return. And that's worked very well to date. In the future, maybe we'll have a small commercial arm that would have some sort of business in there that would contribute to the non-profit. But we just keep reviewing that decision.
And how does that affect your day-to-day work compared to when you were working in for-profit organizations? How does that affect you in the resources you have or the challenges you run into? Is it very different?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I would say, and I'm quite proud of this, and I come across many other organizations started by investment bankers, for example. Now, I'll come from the private sector that started off a non-profit or a social enterprise. We're all very much the same. I mean, I draw on business, not just experience, but business discipline constantly. And so when we go into a conversation with a potential partner in Africa or whichever part of the world, you're drawing down on a lot of these are basic things for you in business and for us. It's like you're going to create a partnerships. It's not a one-off sale. So there has to be a win-win. There has to be management of that partnership. You have to understand the brand, if you like, on the other side of the table. Mm-hmm. So you can create these sustainable relationships. And the other part, I would say, is that instead of us, a lot of non-profits fall into this. So they have a solution and it's about distributing it out, getting it out there. they're not particularly focused on the consumption of their solution or the impact. But if you're in business, you don't get a second sale unless somebody's consumed the first unit of your product or your service. So if you're not just focused on your distribution channels, you're focused on your customers and your consumers, which is a no-brainer in business. That is an emerging, if you like, discipline in the not-for-profit world. And it's really, really, really useful from that point of view. And we've found ourselves to be, kind of accidentally seen as innovative simply by bringing in business practices. So that's why, but resources aren't so, abundant out there. But we have great partners that give us, if you like, in-kind support. But I don't mind. I actually worked in a couple of sectors. I worked in the beer business, as I said, where margins were very high. And I found myself not so good at my job because there was so much buffer there to get things wrong. But when I worked in dairy products actually before that, where the margin was like a tenth of in the beer business. And boy, you had to be really, really clever with how you used your resources. Of course, you'd get things wrong and you'd be taking risks, but you'd have to measure those. So I actually prefer, believe it or not, I'll probably kill myself or beat myself up for saying this, but being in a resource light environment, because you have to be smart on your feet.
And then you get lazy and a bit spoiled.
Yeah, absolutely. Big bucks and throwing millions at sponsorships over here, as we did in the beer business. We had Formula One over here and football and rugby, and it was. I had a lot of fun. I learned a ton, but I wasn't at the top of my game, I don't think.
Okay, so now you are. Now you have to be.
It's a question of survival, right? So, we're living through something that's incredibly difficult. Everybody, on this planet is at the moment. So, something I've learned in Africa, actually from the people that work with us, our teams there, but the people we work in the villages and beyond, is that you have to be resilient in time. When times get tough, it's about resilience and being smart. And having that plan B and having that plan C. And often if you're in a comfort zone, you don't even think about a plan B because it's never going to happen, right? But it actually makes you a little bit more prepared for these tough times.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just earlier you mentioned like one of the key skills or learnings from business is to be focused on how the customer consumes the product, so to say, and make sure that they keep using it. So can you walk us through like what exactly do you as Worldreader, because we haven't really touched on that yet, provide to the consumer? Like how does that work? And can you give an example of some typical end users or customers or people that use Worldreader, and how is it impacting their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just 30 seconds on Worldreader. We provide digital reading solutions across a number of different devices in the global south, starting in Africa or in India or in the Middle East. And we've launched in South America, in Peru. Those solutions work in two different contexts, if I'll simplify it like that. Within schools, so we start off with Kindles, and we're on Android tablets there. And we provide curriculum, reading books, local reading books, written by the local authors. So if we're in Ghana, it's going to be Ghanaian, not just Ghanaian curriculum, but Ghanaian reading books, and sometimes new Ghanaian authors coming in. So whatever part of the world we're working in, we work with local books. So there's a context in schools. And then we work outside of schools, and we work on mobile phones, and we work on smartphones, of course. We've got an Android application. We also work on feature phones, and we've got a super highly compressed web app that we get to many, many millions of people outside of school. So coming to outside school in the day-to-day, and of course that's getting to not just school kids, it's getting to young adults, and older brothers and sisters, but it's actually what we find is that, even if a child is going to school where there's no books, at least they're growing up in a household where their older brother or sister has access to books.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really, as a base to go, that's a really, really important data point when we think what the world's going to look like in 5 or 10 years' time. But coming to your question, yeah, we get a lot of data back. I mean, now this is the great thing, moving from beer, if you like, where it's solid and you have to get your sales data back out.
Yeah.
We get 1 million lines of data back on what's been read on our platforms, especially our mobile platform. So that's helping us to do an incredible thing that, I could only dream about this, years ago, is to say, okay, we've got 15,000 books on that app and we're promoting X, Y, and Z in that country, whatever. We find out what works, Tim. We find out what, importantly, we think is a great book, but nobody's opening.
Yeah.
Or they open for 1 minute, 15 seconds and they close it. And we go, okay, we'll change the book out, or we go back to the author and say, listen, like, instead of having 5 or 6 pages of forward, get straight into the story.
Yeah.
And we've begun to understand over the last 7 or 8 years what actually works on a small, old Nokia screen, those old guys, not just the smartphones. Because, as you'll well know, everybody's fighting over this 4 or 5G space right at the top. 97% of the world's organization in mobile are up there. But there are very few organizations like KaiOS that also see there's enormous market opportunity, perhaps at a lower margin level. I don't know, but I assume so. For the lower end smartphone, higher end feature phone experiences. That is our sweet point. So what have we learned? We did in 2014 with this data.
Yeah, I'm very curious now. What are surprises of what people are reading and what you learned that you didn't expect?
Oh yeah, totally unexpected. It's going to be go into this. Well, we went into this thinking if we bring books from Random House and Simon and Schuster, who donated books to schools in Africa, they're going to be all over these books. Well, we found out on day 2 of my first trip to Ghana. One book on the Ghanaian national football team that was scraped off Wikipedia and put on our Kindles in a way. All the kids were only reading that first. I mean, it's kind of like that was their way the way into the world is to see yourself in that world, and then you can get to the international books and whatever. Yeah. But later on, with the 1 million lines of data, and the UNESCO report, we found 2 amazing things, really. Number one, that girls were reading on our platform more than boys, but not by a little bit, by about 5 to 6 times more.
Wow.
And
what age are we talking about, or just across the, like?
Yeah, that would be on a mobile phone platform. So that would be kind of like 14, 15 to about 24, 25 in the main. Right? And so that was an amazing piece of data. And we really hadn't done a lot of work to say, here's some content for girls. At that time, we put up books that we thought were locally resonant. And so that opened up an enormous part of project work for us to say, hey, if we can get to girls who are clearly the most marginalized, segments of the population, they have a period, they can't go to school, they fail their exams, they're out of school by the time they're 14, encouraged to work or get married or whatever. But if you can keep kids, and especially girls, reading and give them content that they really, really want to read, and that's what we've done over the last 5 or 6 years. We've had some great funders come in and say, hey, we want to do work around gender equality and gender equity. And it's not about putting books up there that say nice things about girls. They have to be real books, real stories, written in a local context, written at a level that somebody of moderate to poor reading can actually get into. Then you get incredible levels of readership. And that was one small piece of data that came through that report. The other piece, which is really coming into its own right now with COVID and schools being shut, is that we found, without any prompting, that a lot of older brothers and sisters and parents and guardians and caregivers were using their phone to read children's stories to their kids at home.
Oh.
And this was totally unprompted at that time. And again, we've created a Read to Kids program in India that we've taken into the Middle East, and we're going to expand out. But thinking of COVID right now, and schools, 90% of schools shut.
Yeah.
Probably not going to open in very soon. Or if they do open, they could be shut down again. The whole home education context is really, really important. Now, I don't know if you've got kids, Tim. I've got 2 girls here. Getting them to read is tough, right? It's tough. And educating your kids is tough. And I know every parent during COVID has struggled with this. But the one device that people do have, they may not have computers. And I'm talking about the developed world, if you like, as well as the developing.
Yeah.
Who have a mobile phone. And we've got a lot of expertise and developed quite a lot of expertise around how to, if you like, seduce, this is where the marketing goes on, seduce the parents, the guys, into the app, into the application, and then get them to do very, very simple exercises to read to their kids. And a lot of our work's come into real focus over the last 4 or 5 months because of this out of school context for learning, both for kids and both for youth.
Yeah, so that's what actually was on my mind. That's one of my next questions. Like, how do you get people to know about the app, and who do you target? And how was it before COVID, and now is it like, does it go to the teachers, or people just directly find you on the App Store, or like how do you get before people have the app, how do you get them to know about it and to get them to download it to their devices?
Yeah, isn't that the big question? I like this. Somebody from the Mobile World Congress said this a couple of years ago. It says, you can choose all the great apps you want. It's all about distribution. It's all about and that's difficult, and you're going to know that as well as anybody. But we do it in a variety of ways. I suppose our core distributor of the web app is the browser company Opera, the Norwegian company. They've been great to us for the last 6 years, and they've put our app front and center on their speed dial on about 26 million phones a month in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's been great. And that's been a great focus of, people come in, and then a percentage will click on our app, and a percentage will enter a book, and then a percentage will enter a book and read. And then we monitor that data religiously. Other ways of getting out there is through our partnerships, is through social media, or through our corporate partnerships, is to talk about what we're doing, for example, around girls, on what are we doing for, is there a particular book that we've done things like, for example, a competition in Kenya and in Ghana and Nigeria to bring new authors in to write stories, and we have a brief. The story can be no longer than X thousand words, has to be focused on girls, but empowering girls, but it then has to be read by boys as well. And then we've done that with local publishers. We're about 500 publishers we work with across Africa. We work with a small number of these competitions. We end up publishing 10 to 20 to 30 of these books. And then we have all of both the publishers, both the local, it's really the local actors in this, talking about these books. And they're saying, download this app and get this one book. So we don't say, here's 15,000 books, here's one book. You'll get into a big library of incredibly useful other books. And we kind of use, but this is all going back to kind of like basic marketing, in a sense, like you don't go with your whole portfolio, you go with one, new product, and you bring people into your portfolio. And that's been great, and that's good, but it's never ending. I mean, we're sort of like, it sounds a big number, but when it comes to our market size, if you like, and the market size of illiterate people in the world is, according to UNESCO, 750 million, around there. But if you think about illiterate and lowly literate, then that figure becomes about 3 billion people. And that's a big market, and that's primarily why we work with great partners to actually get a piece of that market, if you like. So we have to be talking at the millions, and then we have to be working with each of that data so we get more percentage of people coming into our app to be reading and reading more. And, it's, we know it's not a day, we'll be done by next week. It could be another 30 years, but it's working through great partnerships that we're going to get to those millions of people and give them a chance of reading.
Nice. What about yourself? Do you have time to read? Are you a big reader?
Yeah, of course I've got into the sort of like, I'm a kind of news hound. Uh-huh. So I will read, when it comes to reading, I like to read books around, factual things. And I like to read the histories of it. And I'm actually just reading a book about, if you like, it sounds strange, but it's kind of my early childhood, about industrialization of the British car industry in the 1970s. It probably sounds really, really dry, but when the British car industry was leading Europe, and didn't see Italy, didn't see Spain, didn't see Germany, didn't see France, and just how they missed the whole market, if you like. And that's what I kind of like. So when I come to read, I'm not great on reading fiction anymore. I used to be as a kid, but my kids are great on that. And
what's the title of this book you just mentioned, in case anybody wants to read it?
Oh, I'll have to root it out for you. It's like it's the industrialization of the car industry.
Okay.
I'll send you a link afterwards to it. It's like it's
okay. Yeah, then we can include it if somebody's interested. I might be interested, so that's nice. We have a few minutes left. I wanted to touch on something else as well that you're involved in, called Catalyst 2030. What is that exactly?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so 12 months ago, that didn't exist. That was in the minds of somebody. But say in August, September, it actually began to be something that talked about. And what it is really groups of social entrepreneurs. And although we're not a social enterprise, we're considered a social entrepreneur and kind of leading, one of the leading ones. And we were recognized by the World Economic Forum as being one of their Schwab Social Entrepreneurs of the Year a few years ago.
Yeah.
So that allowed us to be at a conversation table about a year ago, saying, listen, we're not going to put the world right by doing all of our piecemeal, partial, uncoordinated, by the way, activities.
Yeah.
And when we come to the SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals for your listeners that the United Nations put together for 2030, there are some clear objectives, about 17 of them, but for education and for health. We're just not going to achieve those if we continue to work both in this uncoordinated, partial way, and also we work in our silos rather than having a much more connected way of coming together. So social entrepreneurs across the world and big organizations like Ashoka, Schwab and Skoll, these are organizations of social entrepreneurs, came together, and we were one of the founding members of that at Davos. It was launched at Davos in January. Spring forward like 8 months, and it's nearly 300 organizations, and we're one of the. I actually head up. I'm going back to my marketing communications route. I kind of co-chair one of the communications groups there, and it's great to go back into starting a new organization. We're all volunteers. Yeah. But we're putting this together, and it's bringing in incredible.
But then how do you coordinate between? I mean, that's a lot of organizations, and then how do you achieve that coordination? Is it like you have regular meetups, or is it an online forum, or how should I imagine that?
Yeah, it's all of the above. We actually physically got together in near London in February, just before COVID hit, and then everything has been on Zoom since then.
Yeah.
So we've done big conferences about all of these issues, the climate, the oceans, education, whatever, bringing stakeholders from all across the world to these conferences. And we actually, together, virtually published a report that was presented to the Director General of the United Nations about 4 weeks ago on recommendations for COVID and post-COVID. and recommendations, I have to say, for they call it in this area. I didn't understand what this meant before, actually. Systems change, but the good about systems change. But it's actually, if you really want to make a difference in a country, you have to have policy making systems change. It's not just good enough to deliver a solution. And that's where I've learned a ton over the last few years, is that, what we do is good, but if we're not changing policy and government policy in those countries, or helping to change those policies on the basis of evidence and data, you're not going to get long-term sustainable change. And that's just in education. And it normally has to be multi-sector. I mean, Tim, this is a whole new world for me of learning. It's just like I'm quite good at just taking a product or service and just getting it out there and maximizing.
Yeah.
This is a whole different world. But COVID, yeah, I mean, like I said, never waste a good crisis. And it's like a crisis actually breaks all of those paradigms, and all of these, many governments are looking for new solutions across the board on health, on education. So it's ironically a good time to be talking to governments, because they're more open to actually considering different solutions, and they're more embracing them. So Catalyst 2030, we'll put a link in the bottom. I encourage people to check what that group of amazing organizations are doing.
And then I think in 1 or 2 years we can have another one of these, but then we talk about that and the policy changes. Yeah, it's a whole different topic. Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry?
I was going to say that we talk about government, but private sector is often the most powerful vector in any country.
Mm-hmm.
So having, working with guys like yourselves, and working with other major private sector visionary operators, those things like this, thinking of the future, is really, really important. And often the best sort of influence, if you like, pressure you can put on government is having the private sector saying, this is working, and sometimes, we can have a chat with the ministries of education and whatever, and we say in a polite way and said, listen, if you go to your village, minister, and you go to a school, there's no books in there, but everybody else in the village has access to a mobile phone, and if you want to remain relevant as a ministry, you need to embrace the digital route. Otherwise, X operator or two is going to do that for you. And it's a light way of pressurizing change. So I can't understate the value of working with corporates and organizations that are thinking of this part of the pyramid, if you like, further down the pyramid. And actually what can be done with simple, cheaper, accessible technology. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, great. I think that was very nice. It's great to hear everything you're working on. Is there anything I missed? That I mean, of course, there's so much more we could talk about, but anything that you want to highlight that I didn't touch on or asked?
Well, just do check us out. What we're very open to is learning from others, and for people to say, why don't you think of X, or have you thought about that partner, or I've seen your app, what about X? These types of books, and we get enormous. That's where we learn, right? Yeah. So we're not in a cocoon, and it's sometimes easy to say that, but we're genuinely open, and the fact that many of the organisations, including yourself, are working really successfully in the global south. That sort of knowledge is so useful. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here talking with you guys, but also talking to your audience, because your audience are going to be experts in the field, in the areas that we want to work with. Yeah. And that's gold, and having dialogues. So I would encourage people just to reach out to me through one of those links, and very happy to open those conversations up.
And where should they do that? Is it a website, Twitter, email, or where should they reach you?
Yeah, we'll put them in the thing. But Colin, 1L, at worldreader.org is one. You can find me, Colin McElwee, on Twitter and LinkedIn. they're both really good, and I will always check those out. But even if you just write to Worldreader and say Colin said,
They will find you.
I think I'm still the only Colin. We're about
Okay. Well, we will make sure to put the links also in the description. So yeah, that should be okay. And do feel free to reach out to Colin. It's great that you're open to that and so open to learning, of course. Thanks a lot for your time. It was a
you
pleasure.
too, Tim. Yeah, real pleasure. Yeah, and stay safe, all of you.
Yeah, you too. We'll keep in touch. And if you're watching at home or wherever you are, thanks for watching. If you like these videos, then of course you can subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you will be notified whenever there's a new one ready. And you can follow us on social media as well, on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. Just search for KaiOS. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode of Enabling Tomorrow.